I typically don't do reviews of multiplayer games apart from the finals video that I did. However, For Honor is a game that I have invested many hours into, and I have many thoughts on this game. So, what better to do than make a review for it? I just want to start by saying that I believe that For Honor is one of the most underrated and unrecognized multiplayer games of the last few years. It's shocking how much this game has gone under the radar, especially considering that it was developed by Ubisoft, who is an extremely famous and well-known developer. For Honor, at this point, is 7 years old, and it has changed and evolved much in its life cycle. I've been playing For Honor somewhat on and off for the last 5 or so years. I have seen many new characters be added and balance changes made throughout this time, and I've seen this game grow and change for a good portion of its life cycle. And I believe that this game is actually in a pretty great state right now. So while this is a review of For Honor, this is also a review of the game as of right now, and whether or not I think you should give it a try in 2024. Firstly, let's go over what For Honor is. For Honor is a medieval third-person fighting game with quite a few different modes and characters to choose from, each with their own unique movesets. After hearing that, you may be thinking that this game is somewhat like Chivalry or Mordhau maybe, but just in third person with some characters. But you'd be wrong. I think that one of the most special things about For Honor is that there are very little other games out there like it. It can't really be compared to anything else within its genre. You can make criticisms about For Honor or Ubisoft, but to say that this game is uninspired or generic would be far from the truth. But let's go a bit more in depth. Let's start by going over what I believe to be the best part of For Honor, and that is the combat. Throughout For Honor's life cycle, there's been many questionable choices involving balancing or just other design choices, but regardless of the state of the game, there's always been something that has caused me to come back to it again and again, and that is the combat. The combat in its most simple form comes down to locking onto an enemy. Then you have three directions, up, left, and right, that you can attack from with either a light or a heavy attack. You can also perform a move called a guard break, where you grab the enemy and they kind of become frozen. And once you do, you can perform an attack or redirect them by bashing them to the side from that guard break position. However, the enemy can counter guard break you if they press the guard break button fast enough just after you have. You can also parry enemy attacks by pressing the heavy attack button in the same direction that their attack is coming from at the right time. And there is also a fate mechanic where during most attacks you can perform, you can cancel them before they land to try and trick your enemy. You can also perform some dodges and rolls here and there and a bit more, but that's generally most of, if not the entire combat system. Sounds pretty simple, right? Yes, but it gets very complex when actually put into practice. Once you take into account the many different playable heroes as well in the game and all of their different movesets, you end up with an extremely complex and hard to master combat system. At the time of recording this, there are 32 characters in the game, part of different factions: Knights, Vikings, Samurai, the DLC faction, Marching Fire, and like a newer pirate faction. And each and every character is unique and has a completely different moveset. For example, if you were to dash forward or dodge forward and then hit the guard break button while playing as Warlord, instead of performing a guard break, you would perform his shield bash. Or, if you were to hold down the heavy attack button as Shigoki, you would perform an unblockable attack, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's an attack that cannot be blocked. It must be dodged or parried. But all of this becomes even more complex when you remember that you can feint most of these moves. Just for instance, you could charge up a shoulder bash with a Warden, only to feint it, go into a guard break, then follow up with a heavy attack. And this is just one very simple combo that you could pull off with just one character. I haven't even mentioned deflections or zone attacks, and believe me that every character you will try will feel different to the last, each with their own unique movesets and combos that you can pull off. However, combos don't mean anything if you have an opponent who can read you easily, and this is the beauty of For Honor. There are rarely any combos you can't get out of or counter. For Honor is really just you trying to read and guess what your opponent is going to do, then following up with a counter for that move. You could have the most thought out, best strategized combo, you have your moves all lined up, but if you keep using that combo over and over again without switching it up or disguising it, your enemy will eventually catch on and they'll begin to predict that guard break you're about to throw or parry that light attack that you keep trying. This ensures that you aren't simply sticking to one strategy the whole time. You constantly must be switching up your moves and staying as unpredictable as possible. This is why, unlike many other fighting games, spamming is rarely an issue because of the heavy reliance on countering and predicting your enemy. Overall, For Honor's combat is extremely well designed and thought out, and regardless of some errors made in other departments of the game, this is what has kept me coming back for over 5 years now. And I truly believe that if this combat clicks with you, you'll stick with the game for a while, because there really is no other game that can provide you with combat similar to this. However, an aspect of this game that amplifies the combat and is actually something that I rarely hear praise for are the game modes. The main game modes that we have here are duels, which are a standard 1v1, brawls, which are 2v2s, deathmatch, which are 4v4s with some minor changes. But then you get to the really big modes. You have capture the flag, dominion, and my personal favorite, breach. You've almost definitely played games with these types of game modes before. Breach, for example, is a game mode where you have to push the payload, something like that. Then you have Dominion, which is a King of the Hill type mode with 3 different capturable points. And then you have Capture the Flag, which is exactly what it sounds like. But here's where these game modes get a lot more complicated and fun. I'm primarily going to focus on the game mode Breach here, because it's the one I'm most experienced with, and I would say it is the most in-depth game mode. Like I said, it's a mode where you and your team have to push and defend a giant ram, but it gets a bit more interesting. You have to push it until it gets to a large door, where it will charge up and take large swings and eventually destroy the door. When you destroy the door, you will move on to the second section of the game, where you have to destroy another door. And behind the second door, there is a giant commander enemy that you must kill. If you do, you and your team wins, but it goes even deeper than that. Helping you defend the payload are a bunch of mini troops. I like to call them minions. Now, these minions die very easily, yet there are a lot of them, and they are constantly spawning at your team's spawn point. Yet the enemy team has minions of their own that will come to your ram and damage it, while also killing your team's minions. But this gets even deeper. Throughout the map, as the payload gets pushed, there are archer points that are by default owned by the defending team, where there are archers that will kill your minions, and your minions can't fight back. But you can run up and capture these points, and when you do, those archers become yours and will kill the enemy minions. But wait, there's more. The final capture point doesn't have any archers. Instead, it has a cauldron that is positioned just above the door your ram needs to destroy, and that cauldron can be manually dropped by the enemy. If it is, it does massive damage to the ram and kills all surrounding minions. Even if you capture the point with the cauldron, the enemy team can still use it. But if you do capture it, then you'll have troops running up there trying to delay the enemy from dropping the cauldron, which is still helpful. But wait, there's still more. In the second phase of the mode, there's an enemy that spawns on the edge of the map called the Guardian. He is a little weaker than the commander, but if your team kills him, then your entire team gets a massive buff that doubles their health, increases their speed and damage. But he is a tough enemy, and the more people you have fighting him, the less people you have defending the ram. But wait, there's even more. Occasionally, flags will spawn around the map, and if you collect one of those flags and bring it to your ram, you will increase the health of your ram. But the enemy team can also take the flag and bring it to their door, increasing the health of the door. But wait, there's even more. By the time you break the last door and get to the commander, your team will have a specific amount of lives and respawns based on the amount of health that your ram had when you broke that last door. So if your ram had just a sliver of health and you barely made it, your team will probably have maybe 4 or 5 lives to kill the commander with. If you fail, then you lose. But if you made it through to the last stage, with a lot of health and your ram had most of the health left, your team could probably have a good 15, 20, 25 lives even to go in and fight the commander with. So damaging the ram is very important for the enemy team, and defending it is important for yours as well, to make sure that you actually have enough lives to kill the commander with at the end. So this may sound like a lot. I mean, it is. I haven't even mentioned the temporary buffs that you can find around the map, or the ballistas that you can use to kill enemies and minions, or the healing areas. There's a lot. But when you're in the thick of it, it actually doesn't feel too overwhelming, and if you have a team with good communication, you can strategize pretty strongly together. For example, if you're defending the ram, you could have someone guarding it, while one or two teammates run up and capture archer zones, and have maybe another teammate ahead of the ram killing the minions. Or on the flip side, if you're on the defending team, you could have someone guarding archer zones, or killing minions at the ram, or guarding the cauldron and then dropping it on the ram. But what I love the most is how dynamic this mode is. You could have your strategy and all could be going well, but all of a sudden the guardian spawns and the enemy team is running to kill him. Or a flag spawns and now you gotta worry about bringing it to your ram while stopping the enemy team from getting it. Rounds of Breach can go on for as long as 30 to 40 minutes at a time, and each round feels like a massive event. I mean it when I say that this is easily one of my favorite game modes in any multiplayer game, and that is because of the many layers and dynamic events that happen throughout each round. In terms of Capture the Flag or Deathmatch, it isn't quite as deep, but they are still fun modes. However, the player counts for these modes are a lot lower than Dominion or Breach. Just to briefly go over what Dominion is, like I said earlier, it's a King of the Hill type mode with 3 capture points. If your team holds one zone, then you get 100 points, and for each zone you hold, you will get 1 point per second. However, if someone on your team is in a zone that has been captured by you, then you'll get 2 points per second, which incentivizes players to actually defend the zones. But as soon as a zone is contested, you stop gaining points. And if the enemy team captures it, then you lose the 100 points, and they gain it. Once a team hits 1,000 points, the enemy team becomes breaking, which means that they can no longer respawn. And if the whole enemy team dies while they are breaking, then you win. But beware, if they capture a zone and steal the 100 points, then they can become unbreaking, and both teams can be breaking at the same time, which can result in some very intense matchups. Overall, the game modes here are amazing and a lot of fun. While I do love the combat, these game modes make the combat so much more fun and enjoyable to experience. One last thing that I'd like to touch on is the customization and progression. In any multiplayer game, progression is key to keeping players playing your game for long periods of time, and the progression here is fantastic, if a bit complicated. Every character has gear, and that gear has stats and bonuses attached to them. Characters also have reputation levels. If you level up 21 times with one character, you earn 1 rep level for them, and the higher rep your character is, the better gear you can get for them. At 0 reps, you only have gray level gear, but at rep 1, you get blue, rep 3, purple, rep 5, gold, and it goes on until the maximum of rep 8. You can go beyond that, but you'll only earn cosmetic rewards. The gear system here is fantastic. There's a transmog system where you can make any piece of gear look like any other piece of gear that you've discovered, which is amazing. And I would say that almost all high rep gear looks fantastic. And the stat bonuses you get aren't game-changing, but certainly help and are worth paying attention to. But let's get on to the cosmetics. You can change the color of your cloth, the color of the metal plating on your armor, add emblems, symbols, different color patterns, and so much more. I've been playing for a while now, and to be honest, I've gone past the point of caring about stats on gear. I mostly play now to unlock better and cooler looking cosmetics and armor for my characters. Part of the fun of progressing in this game is just customizing your many heroes. Safe to say, the customization here is fantastic. It's a bit hard to really describe how many combinations you can do with many different armor pieces and colors and all of this, but once you play, you'll see for yourself. But a bit more on the progression. Your main currency is steel, as you earn a bit by just completing matches, but the bulk of your steel is going to be coming from completing contracts and orders, which will ask you to revive a certain number of players or get executions, little random mini objectives that are never too tedious. And with steel, you can unlock almost anything: new characters, color combos, ornaments, and more. While the progression is good, I would say that without a doubt, the customization is the real standout and what you'll be striving for most of the time that you're playing. So, as I've briefly hinted at before, there sometimes are some updates to this game that aren't the best. Maybe they'll rework a character that didn't need reworking, or they won't rework a character that does need reworking. They'll change certain moves for characters that were perfectly fine, or remove other moves that weren't that bad. There's a lot that can happen that isn't the best. There's some updates that have upset me in the past, as is with most multiplayer games. But even with all of that, the customization, the progression, the combat, the game modes, there's a lot to love here. There's a lot to love in For Honor. There's even a single player campaign mode that, I'll be honest, I haven't finished, but it's pretty fun. It's decent. You have some cool little scenarios in there, and if you're the type of guy that really wants to play the campaign in games like this, there's one here too. There's a lot to love about For Honor, and even with some of the more questionable updates and choices made by the developers, I've stuck with the game for a long time, and I think that if you really click with the combat, you'll stick with it for a long time too. All in all, For Honor is an amazing game that I believe doesn't get nearly as much praise as it deserves. With a revolutionary, one-of-a-kind combat system, really smart and well-designed game modes, and fantastic customization. For Honor is a crown jewel in Ubisoft's multiplayer catalog, and you should definitely give it a try. Thank you for watching.